Recording. Good evening, good people. We are so glad that you're here with us tonight. We're going to get started with our content here in a bit, but we want to just give a minute for folks to get in here, get comfortable, remind your friends that it's mass call time, and invite them to come and watch with you. Let's just take a moment while folks are getting in and getting comfortable to give love to the team that makes this call happen. It's more than just like checking a to-do list box. This is about making sure that all of us have access to learn from and with one another and build the power of our people. So I want to thank the folks in particular that are critical to tonight's call. I want to thank the On Point team, all the tech and comms and design crews. I want to thank every single organization, Move On, Public Citizen, Indivisible, and more, all of our friends that made this call possible tonight. And really specifically, I want to thank every single one of you for not regarding it robbery to be with us and to invite all of your fam, all of your friends, all of your comrades and colleagues to come and learn together what we must be doing in this season. Good evening and welcome to the Mass Call, to process politics and our feelings, to be reminded of our work in this critical time, and to learn together. As we've been doing for many months now, since April of last year, this Mass Call is our chance to take a step back as the intersection of many movements and examine where we are. We want to look at the current events, but we also want to look past the punditry and put this moment in a bigger context with specific ways that you can plug into meaningful work. So thank you for prioritizing the call tonight. I want you again to holler at your folks real quick and tell them to come on in and join us. Today, we're going to be hearing from people on the front lines of our movement about the urgent and important work that they're doing and what you can do to do your part. I'm Ashley Woodard Henderson, your host for tonight. Welcome to the folks who haven't missed a call. And I want to say hello and welcome to our new folks too. We're so glad that you've joined us. We've been waiting for you. If you're watching on Zoom, you can already see that some of our family in the chat is saying hello. They're saying their names. They might be sharing their pronouns. They might be saying where they're calling in from. They might be sharing what organizations that they rock with. Feel free to do the same in the chat function on the Zoom. And then I also want to shout out to our folks that are watching on Instagram and YouTube. Y'all feel free to do the same in the comment sections where you're watching. And I want to send some special love to folks who are watching after this live on the recording. One thing before we get into it, we need to be clear with each other that when we fight for justice and liberation for all people, there's always going to be some haters. The more visible that our work is, the more they're going to come after us. It is certainly upsetting, but we will not be surprised if there are trolls on with us tonight. If you see any hateful messages wherever you're watching, if that's the Zoom chat or on one of the other streams, please flood the comment section of the chat with messages of solidarity, messages of love, messages of togetherness. Let us not be distracted by what they mean for evil. Let us stay focused on the good work that we're trying to do together. And remember that as we're in dialogue in those chats and comment sections, we can disagree with each other. We're multi-ideological, but we're going to do that disagreeing without disrespecting each other. We're trying to build a we here. So please, please, please show some love for one another in the chat and act accordingly. Now, my friends, the world is literally and figuratively on fire around us. And breaking just today, we hear a story that reminds us that justice deferred is justice denied. We're learning the details of the conviction that is not to be of Donald Trump for attempting to block the peaceful transition of power on January 6th. We all remember it. Meanwhile, the United States is engaged again in a game of publicly laying claim to parts of the world that don't belong to it. The cartoonish claims over Canada and Greenland may seem ridiculous and to some people even laughable, but they only serve to remind us of the land and resource grabbing of our country's not so distant past. Yes, these are no doubt, hard times, and sometimes even bordering on the absurd. But through it all, it's critically important that we don't lose sight of what's really going on. For all the hyperbole, the exaggeration, for all the misdirection, misinformation, and disinformation, there is something serious happening. This is not normal. It shouldn't be normal. Let's look at the fires in Los Angeles. This is a horrific man-made disaster that is forcing into our view once again the realities of the climate change that we're creating. But for every dot we connect about the ways human activity is heating our climate, there are others trying to connect different dots. From those making claims that the fires were a result of the Los Angeles Fire Department's diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that sadly too many people are willing to believe, to more insidious attacks by those who want to undermine the role of government altogether so that they can chop it up and they can sell it off. We see in the news the story of a fire that destroyed the homes of working people and the wealthy alike. But unfortunately, the lesson some folks will draw from this is that our public firefighters were not sufficiently devoted to saving them. We see stories about privatization, the wealthy folks hiring their own private firefighting forces. We see some choosing to use this crisis as one more opportunity to take away something that should belong to everybody, to all of us, and to make it exclusively theirs. And we have to worry about what comes after this fire. Will the insurance companies drop coverage for homeowners? Will speculators try to steal the land of families who have in many cases lived on the same street for generations? Will Congress play games with disaster relief funding to score political victories on things unrelated to helping people in their moment of need? Even when these fires are over, y'all, danger will continue to burn bright and burn hot. And that can be overwhelming. Not to mention the many things that we're going to talk about later in this call, like the nominations. This is a stressful and anxiety-provoking time. But I want you to remember that we are stronger together. So we're going to take a moment to breathe in, to take a deep breath in through our noses and out through our mouths with some affirmation of who we are and where we need to go, while exhaling the things that are going to keep us from it. So I want you to take a second, feel yourself supported wherever you are by the infrastructure around you. Then I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose and breathe in to reground in our solidarity with working people where we are and everywhere. And then breathe out any feelings of powerlessness or individualism that would keep us from it. Today's call is a tale of two approaches to this historic moment. They represent the ways we will have to move through these hard times starting right now. We can neither ignore the immediate reality in front of us and fail, or we can focus only on the injustices we can see right now at the expense of taking the long view and fail. On this call, we're going to make a different choice and talk about the things that we can do right now to successfully and directly oppose Trump in the immediate term, especially as he is filling his government with dangerous and incompetent loyalists. But if we were doing this just responding to Trump's latest moves, we'd be running into the trap he's setting for us. When we're only reacting, when we're only moving as reactionaries, we are very rarely moving from an empowered stance, one rooted in long-term strategy. That's why on this call, we're also going to talk about power building strategies for the long game that we are responsible for playing. We're going to hear about candidate recruitment trainings for local office that the Working Families Party is beginning right now. Because the people in Congress right now quite often started out as school board members and city council members many years ago. So we have to keep building the pipeline that will bring working class people of all races into the fight and into elected office. And we're going to talk about power. We're going to keep talking about power because this is the currency of our work together. Without power, we are bystanders while speculators carve up our neighborhoods, or as insurance companies hide behind their spreadsheets to deny our claims and cancel our coverage. With power, we can change the game. We're going to talk about the power we need to build as a movement ecosystem, because no one group or organization or one sector, no matter how great its ideas, how righteous their values, or big its budget, has the power to do this alone. If we could do it by ourselves, we would have already done it. We need to build an integrated and coordinated division of labor between us where each of us is playing our highest purpose. And I know you're thinking, oh, Ashley, that all sounds nice and hard. And you're right. But I promise you it can be done. It's been done by our movement elders and our ancestors, and we can do it again. I wouldn't be here with you today if I did not believe it was so. So let's face this moment of intersecting and compounding crises together. We have each other, and that's where we have to start to build and to rebuild. There's going to be many things over the course of this call that you can do to plug into this collective work to ensure that we control the terrain in which we continue to build our power. First thing I need you to do is to text mass call to 30403 so that when these organizations continue to come together, you can get the bat signal to come and join us. So if you haven't already, if you are new to the mass call, text mass call to 30403 to stay plugged in. The second thing I want to remind you is that all of these calls are recorded. So if you miss something in the chat, you miss something that a speaker says, you are going to be able to catch it again by going to workingfamilies.org/mass calls. And every single mass call that we've done since the beginning in April is all there for you to use. And this one will be uploaded as soon as we have the recording available. All of the calls to action that you will hear tonight are also going to be sent to you via the way that you registered, so that we can make sure that you've got it in one place, likely by tomorrow or so. Give us a minute to get all the pieces intact. But I promise you'll have access to the recording, and I promise that you'll have follow-up conversations with us through email or text so that you've got all of the asked for calls to action. And again, we're only going to be as useful as the number of people that we can mobilize to do this work together. So if you haven't yet shared the mass calls with your friends, again, I want you to ask them to text mass call to 30403. And again, it is MASS space CALL to 30403. Now, let me remind you what we're doing here on these mass calls. These mass calls are being hosted by the Working Families Party, and they highlight both WFP member organizations, some of our friends, leaders from across the country. Again, tonight, you're going to hear speakers from Move On, from Indivisible, from Public Citizen. And as always, we want these calls to be grounding, to provide you with information and strategic orientation from movement leaders that you can trust, and to give you concrete things that you can do to get off the noisy hamster wheel of information and misinformation that's being thrown at you all the time, every day, and get you back to power building actions. So if you like what you see here and you want to be plugged in for more, make sure you've texted mass call to 30403. We've got another mass call coming up, and we want you to be able to RSVP for that. So we're going to drop a link to the Mobilize page where you can RSVP in the chat right now. Again, that is for our upcoming mass call after tonight, which is going to be on the 23rd, same time, same place. You can RSVP for that call on January 23rd by clicking the link in the chat to the Mobilize page. Here's what we're going to do on tonight's call. We have a bit of an out of the ordinary call because we wanted to make sure that there was space to hear from some of our partners who are leading the fight over the shape of the incoming Trump administration. They're fighting intentionally hard in the halls of power to block some of Trump's worst appointments, and we will hear from them at the top of tonight's call. Then, as always, we're going to do some political education on our block and build strategy. And then finally, we're going to end the call in a slightly different place than where we start. If we're going to start by hearing about the fight at the federal level to block Trump's nominees, we're going to end with a call to step up to take local action. If the stuff happening in DC has you feeling overwhelmed, the best thing you can do is figure out where you can start doing this work and where you can start building power in your own community. So for some of you, that's going to look like running for local office. So at the end of this call, you're going to hear about how you can plug into some upcoming trainings that the Working Families Party is running for people that are considering running for office. And as always, wherever you are, we want you to have concrete ways that you can plug into this work and take action, because we don't learn how to be strategic to just have a better analysis than the other guys. We learn how to be strategic to put it into practice and to build people's power. That's enough of me yapping. I want to get my friends, my colleagues, these incredible movement leaders in front of you so they can both school us on what's going on with the nominees and give us calls to action to make sure that we're doing what we can to salvage the semblance of democracy in this country from the top down. I'm going to bring up Leah Greenberg. Y'all know her. She's the co-founder and co-executive director of Indivisible. I'm going to bring up Rana Epting, the executive director of Move On. And I'm going to bring up Robert Weissman, the co-president of Public Citizen. I need you all to show some love in the chat to these incredible leaders who are going to be with us, teaching us tonight. I see you in the chat. And what I remember from the last time that we did this, Leah, you've got a fan club on these mass calls, my dear. So I know I'm introducing you to a few people, but most of the folks in the chat, I'm sure, are showing you love. Can you come in and just give us the context, the larger vision of what's going on and what we should know about it, and how people can plug into the work to pay attention to what's going on with the nomination process?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashley. Thanks everybody who's on the call tonight. It is so good to be in this space again. It is so good to be in community again. And just special gratitude to Ashley for taking us through an enormously challenging period with the vision and the wisdom and the grace that you always do. I am going to talk a little bit about what the nominations process is and how we're orienting and what your leverage is. So you have probably heard from the news, from social media. I'm not going to break any news here. Trump is planning to put some very, very bad people in very powerful positions. You want to know how to stop it? We are going to cover it. First, I am going to provide a quick overview of literally what is happening, what is a cabinet nominee, how they're confirmed, why it matters, how you have the power to stop these dangerous nominations. Basics. Let's start with the basics. A nominee is someone that the president picks to lead a federal agency, to play an important role in their administration. Cabinet nominees, by definition, oversee some kind of major area of government, like national security, public health, law enforcement. These roles are enormously powerful. They help shape laws. They help enforce rules. They make decisions that affect all of our lives. Each of these people, for the cabinet, have to be confirmed by the Senate. The process is senators hold confirmation hearings where they look at nominees' qualifications, past actions, whether they're a good fit for the job. Those have started already. After the hearings, committees vote to decide if the nominee should move forward. Then if they move forward, the whole Senate votes on whether to confirm them. That is a majority vote threshold. If they are confirmed, they take charge of those important agencies. They have a ton of control after that over public policies. If Trump gets these folks in, it is going to be bad news for democracy and for public safety. The people he is picking, they are not chosen because they are qualified. They are not chosen because they are committed to public service. They are chosen because they are loyal personally to Trump and his plans for consolidating power and committed to doing his bidding to advance everything that he wants for his MAGA extremist allies and for his billionaire buddies. These are people like Kash Patel, who is openly promising to weaponize the FBI in order to advance Donald Trump's agenda and go after Donald Trump's enemies. Russ Vought, who is the architect of Project 2025, potentially going into the incredibly important role at OMB, Office of Management and Budget. RFK Jr., whose dangerous anti-science, anti-medicine ideas have gotten people killed and will continue to get people killed if he is put in charge of HHS. Pete Hegseth, who showed the world today exactly what an insulting and dangerous choice he is for the Department of Defense, and a slew of billionaires who are in there not to do the job of making your life better, of making government work for you, but making government work for their friends, for their wealthy friends. These nominees are going to push extreme ideas that harm our democracy. They are going to take away accountability and give the power to Trump and his allies. They are going to harm vulnerable communities every way that they can find. They each have their own personal and political agenda. They're there to serve Trump, not the American people. So what do we do? Good news is that grassroots organizing, especially in purple and blue states, can have a huge difference right now because we are going to have to pressure our senators to block these folks. that is going to retire. Again, this is a majority vote, so this is going to require the entire Democratic caucus plus peeling off some Republicans. And that means we got to push everywhere. You may think now, a common thing we hear from folks is, I'm in a blue state. I got Democratic senators. I don't need to worry about them. I am very sorry to inform you that that is not the case. Democrats are in a fragile place right now. They are pretty freaked out. A bunch of them are making concerning noises about trying to go along with Trump's agenda. For the purposes of this campaign, we cannot assume that we have got all our Democrats on board. And even if they are ready to vote our way, we cannot assume that they are going to be bold fighters, that they are going to lead, that they're going to pose the hard questions in these hearings and come out of those hearings and make a good speech, explain exactly why they're opposing these folks, that they're going to fight with all the tools in the toolbox, unless they hear from us, unless they hear from a lot of us. So if you've got a Republican, we're going to need to get them on board too. We know that can seem like a tall order, but public pressure has made the difference in the past, and it can do again. Remember, Donald Trump's already lost one of his nominees. He tried to put Matt Gaetz in at the Department of Justice. That was a no-go. So it has happened before. It can again. I can tell you right now, the only path to stopping these folks is from gaining unchecked power, is nationwide outrage and pressure. So we're going to share throughout this call concrete ways you can help. You can write letters to the editor to raise the alarm about these folks. You can call or email your senators to tell them you oppose those nominees. I can tell you, I've been in an office, our congressional office. They tally those up. They want to know how many people want to see the nominee confirmed, how many people want to see the nominee opposed. It matters if you make your voice heard. You can visit our website, nixthenoms.com, which is being dropped in the chat, to learn more about who these target nominees are, why they're a threat, how you can take action. This is a critical moment. You have a lot of influence. Your voices matter. Together, we make sure the government serves the people, not Trump's billionaire buddies, but only if we make our voices heard.
Y'all give it up one time for Leah. I see all the indivisible members in the chat going wild. All the folks that remember you from the previous mass calls. Folks are glad that you're back. Thank you for being with us tonight, Leah. Rana, I want to go to you to start to zoom us in a little bit more. It's like, folks might have lost count of all the ridiculousness that's happening with the nominations because of how overwhelming this political cycle has been. So can you zoom us in and give us some more clarity about why these calls to action matter in this time?
Happy to. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for spending an hour with us tonight. We are less than a week away from the second Trump administration. I know you all know that. That's why you're on this call. I also know that none of us wanted to be in this situation. We all worked incredibly hard for a different outcome. And I know in many ways we're scared about what the next few years will entail for our freedoms, for our rights, for the future of this country that we all love so dear. But what I also know is I know that we are not alone. I know there are still more people who believe in compassion and peace over hate and divisiveness. I know our healthcare, our economy, our climate, and a better future of our country, I know those are all worth fighting for. And today, I'm here to tell you, as we are approaching what could end up being the most important period of Trump's entire second term, here to tell you, we are approaching this. And in his first 100 days, we're going to make an impact. We all know as he takes office, Donald Trump will shed the mantle of change he's worked so hard to create, and he will be at the helm of a corrupt, dysfunctional, and power-hungry administration with a deeply unpopular agenda. He may have won the election by a slim margin. He may be popular in the polls, but let's be clear, his agenda is massively unpopular. And our job, as he seeks to implement it, is to leverage the inevitable backlash that will come. And we're going to leverage it to help land a meaningful blow to Trump's Project 2025 within the first 100 days. We're going to do that not only to stop bad things from happening, like some of these appointments or all of these appointments, but also to remind us that we do have agency. We do have power. And when we exercise it together, we have the opportunity to make great impact. And our work starts now, tonight. It starts with stopping Trump's corrupt cabinet nominations. And as Leah said, the only reason these people are nominated is because they will do the bidding for Trump. They aren't committed to making our lives better. Donald Trump has handpicked these folks to try to take away our health care, to raise our costs, and jeopardize our safety in exchange for more money in their already overflowing pockets. And we won't let them. We cannot trust RFK Jr. as Secretary of Health and Human Services with our families and children's health and safety. His longtime opposition to vaccines, no matter what he's saying today, he has long held anti-vax opinions. That can lead to a resurgence of childhood illness like polio and measles. We cannot let that happen. And we've read the reporting. Under Trump's orders, nominated Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth would turn the military against our own people. He would abuse power to protect and cater to Donald Trump and his own power over what is best for the people of this country. RFK Jr., Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, unfortunately, the list goes on and on. They all care more about protecting Trump's power than making our lives safer, better, and less expensive. And I won't lie to you, defeating them won't be easy. It's a tall order, but most things in life are worth fighting for, and they don't always come easy. And we can do this. Today and over the next 100 days, you can make your voices heard and encourage your friends, family, neighbors to do the same. You can look in the chat right now for opportunities to contact your senators, to make calls or send letters and more. And just like Leah said, don't take any of them for granted. Democrats need to hear from us just as much as Republicans, just as much as folks in very moderate states. Donald Trump and Republicans are counting on us to give up. They're counting on us to let them take over our country. But might I remind you, tens of millions, tens and tens and tens of millions of people voted against their hate-filled agenda. And we will not let them run away with our freedoms and our democracy. Throughout human history, we have encountered roadblocks, setbacks, and people standing in the way. But at every point, we have persisted, and it is time for us to persist once again right now. Our task over the next 4 years will be to harness every ounce of our power we have and to use the levers, institutions, and tactics available to us to stop this dangerous agenda, because we won't retreat and we won't back down, and we're going to stop these nominations with your help. So thank you for being here tonight, and I'll hand it back to Ashley.
Give it up one time for the Move On family. I see y'all in the chat. I know a bunch of folks are like, I'm already calling, I'm already emailing, and that is amazing. But we also want to coordinate our efforts. So if you have already done it, that's cool. I love that. Thank you so much for your discipline and rigor and your on top of itness. And I need you to go and click these links so that we can track how many people are actually turning the tide with us, right? So I know it might seem pointless, but I actually really do need you to go click the form to set up a meeting with your senator. I really need you to volunteer to write a letter to the editor opposing Patel's nomination. And I really need you to go click that link, www.nixthenoms, to make calls and to send messages to your senators, because we're going to collectively start doing that together tomorrow. So again, I know it might seem like an extra step in your process. Maybe some of you are like, that's not really my jam. But right now, we're all going to have to do things that we might be uncomfortable with for the sake of being bigger than the sum of our parts to stop some of this terrible stuff from happening to our people, right? So I need you to click those links that we keep dropping in the chat. You've seen me, you've seen Jonah, you might have seen some other WFP members, volunteers, staffers dropping it in the chat as well. I need you to click those links. If everybody even just clicks one, we'll be making incredible progress to these calls to action, seeing them through so that they can change the material conditions that we're fighting in. So thank you, Ronna, for getting us set up. Leah, thank you so much for setting the context. And now, Rob, I want to kick it to you. I also want to shout out the Public Citizen family for continuing to be so consistently present for our mass calls. We've heard about some of the biggest bad guys that are being nominated. Can you give us a little bit more context about these nominees, particularly Patel, whose name we keep hearing brought up over and over and over again. I'll toss it to you.
Thanks so much. And it's great to be with y'all. I want to say just a quick word about feeling hopeless and finding hope. And I think a lot of us feel after the election alone and maybe a little isolated and maybe a little despairing. And I think we have to exercise our muscles, our hope muscles, intentionally to find a way forward. And I think we do that most importantly by coming together and taking action. And these calls are just so vital for facilitating that. The only thing I don't like about these calls is we don't get the chance to all be in person. But short of that, these are really essential. And I know I'm getting charged up listening to my friends talk here. So I'm going to try to keep the energy high. Just again, reiterating the context of what Trump has done. It's quite an amazing set of people he's nominated for the cabinet. He's got cranks and cronies, Fox TV stars, that's an important qualification, and billionaires. In fact, I think you could say the one thing that unifies all these nominees is that they're profoundly unqualified for the jobs they've been nominated for. They haven't been nominated because they're qualified to do the job. They've been nominated because they have the capacity and the predilection to carry out a Trump extremist agenda, or to enrich themselves, or to help Trump get rich, or to transfer money from all of us to the billionaire class. That's what it's about. Now, when we engage in these fights, just again, to take these steps, do those things that are being posted in the chat. It can feel a little formulaic. That's the problem of us not being together, but we are taking action together. And Ashley was saying, if we all do it, we'll be far. If we all do it, we'll stop some of these nominees. We'll stop some of these nominees. We can stop some of these nominees. As Leah said, we already stopped one of them, Matt Gaetz. That's the first thing we do. We actually are trying to win, and we're going to win on some of these. The second thing we do is, in engaging in this process, we're telling the story of who these people are. We're framing what the Trump administration is about, and we're building our power to take it on for the next 4 years. And the third thing is we're stiffening the spines of the Democrats. So again, as Leah and Rana were saying, if you're in a Democratic state, they still need to hear from you. You will make them be better. If they're a little weak, you'll make them stronger. If they're strong, you'll let them do what they really want to do. So they really need to hear from all of us. And it is a motley crew that we need to be opposing. It's a longer list than we've got time to go through. We've highlighted some of the worst ones, whether it's Russ Vought, the Christian nationalist designed to oversee the regulatory process and deregulate corporations across the government and slash the government programs across the way. That's his mission through Project 2025 and now Empowered. Whether it's Robert F. Kennedy, who, as we've talked about, is a vaccine denialist, but not just that. He's a conspiracist and a fantasist, and he is going to undermine public health in very fundamental ways if he's confirmed. Who's talking to him about, are you going to expand healthcare? Are you going to make sure that everybody has healthcare who needs it? Are you going to make sure that drugs are affordable for everyone? Who's asking those questions? Well, it's on us to make sure the senators are asking those questions and demanding answers. We had Pete Hegseth testifying today, a cartoon character of a nominee who would be laughable except for how retrograde and dangerous his views are. He's overtly anti-woman. He's overtly anti-gay. He's overtly anti-trans. He's overtly pro-Confederate naming of military bases. And he talks nonsense with his faux toughness about a warrior class. But what he's really saying is, how can we make the U.S. military more dangerous and reckless around the world? That's the mission he wants to carry out, and it's the one we can't let him succeed at. Can't have that job. And last, I want to talk about this guy, Kash Patel. And again, encourage you to use the tools in the chat, including a letter to the editor tool that's around Kash Patel, to make sure we're speaking out against this nominee to be the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Those of you who know your history and know about COINTELPRO know about how the FBI has been deployed over time to take on social movements, sometimes killing our leaders. Kash Patel is of that ilk. He has explicitly said he wants to use the agency to go after his and Donald Trump's enemies. He wants to go after our movements. That's his mission, right? The FBI could be investigating runaway corporate crime. That's not what he wants to talk about. He could even be dealing with street crime. That's not what he wants to talk about. He wants to talk about how the FBI can be deployed against his enemies and Donald Trump's enemies. You can't have a functioning government, can't have a functioning democracy when the national police have as their mission going after enemies. So we have got to block this guy, and he's blockable. Republicans who know him personally hate him. People like John Bolton, Bill Barr, who've worked with him, not exactly our allies. They're working hard against this guy because they find him to be so repulsive. So we've got a real chance to beat him. We use these tools. We're going to knock him out and a bunch of the others and build our power for what we've got to do for this really difficult time coming up for the next few years. Again, thank you all for doing what you're doing. Thank Working Families Party for holding us together. And we throw it back to you, Ashley.
Can we give it up one time for Leah and the Indivisible fam, to Rana and the Move On fam, and to Robert and the public citizen community for coming, for giving us so much concise intel, and for really, really, really clear things that we can be doing about it. I just want to shout out a couple of folks in the chat who have already said, I signed up. Nix the Noms is so helpful. Thank you for these calls to action. Cynthia, I saw that you signed up. Christine, I saw that you signed up. Thank you all. I've seen other folks saying that they're already calling and they want to call more. Folks wondering if we should do it once a day, once a week, multiple times. Y'all sign up and you're going to get these calls to action. I mentioned this earlier, but for folks who are overwhelmed by the quickness, the speed of the moving chat, I want you to take a deep breath. I want you to unclench your jaw. I want you to relax your shoulders, because we're going to follow up with both text messages and with emails, depending on how you registered for this call, to make sure that you have access to every single one of the calls to action that have been shared tonight. So if you, like me, are slow and it takes you a minute and you lose it in the chat, don't stress out. We got you. We're going to take care of you. And we're going to make sure that you get the follow-up emails, the text messages, if you've texted mass call to 30403, so that we can make sure that in the morning you wake up and you can go and look at the email, look at your inbox, look at your phone, and see the 3 calls to action. We're also going to say them probably a million more times before we get off this call. So I promise you, we will not leave you behind. And this call is, in fact, recorded, and you'll be able to find that as well. We'll make sure you've got the link. You've heard these incredible leaders, these incredible humans, my friends. There are a bunch of things that you can do if you want to plug into the fight to block these nominees. You can write a letter to the editor. You've heard from Indivisible, Move On, and Public Citizen, everything that can make it easy, because they have a plan. I'm going to share one more time right now some of the things that you can do right now to address the most harmful of the nominees. You can set up a meeting with your senator. Trump's nominees aren't just bad picks. They're a direct threat to democracy and public safety, y'all. These extremists are poised to seize control of critical government agencies, weaponize federal power, and push a problematic agenda that's going to harm everyday folks in our country. So you can set up a meeting with your senator. Again, we're going to make sure that you get that link in the chat. You can also, I'm saying, in addition to, write a letter to the editor opposing Kash Patel's nomination. He is a dangerous nominee for the FBI. Letters to the editor can be a powerful tool in educating your community members about key issues and publicly pressuring your member of Congress to do the right thing. So we're going to drop a link in the chat for you to be able to write a letter to the editor to oppose Kash Patel's nomination. Last but certainly not least, you can make calls and send messages to your senators. We're going to start calls together tomorrow on January 15th, but they're going to be ongoing. If approved, the individuals that you've heard about tonight are going to assume control of federal agencies that touch every single aspect of our lives. Agencies responsible for protecting our health, agencies that are responsible for securing our nation, ensuring justice, that we're safe, that we have what we need to thrive. This is a critical moment to act. We're going to make sure that we drop the link to sign up in the chat. You've heard it multiple times tonight. It is www.nixthenoms.com. We'll drop the link to the tool in the chat. We want you to do at least one of those things. We want you to sign up for it tonight. Kudos and gold stars if you sign up for more than one. I want you to keep I see the chat, so I want you to keep telling me in the chat if you have signed up. We're gonna keep a rolling number if we can of folks that have said they've signed up, and I'm going to shout you out throughout the call as I am able. And as a preview of some of the good things to come, I want you to know that there are 2 opportunities that are going to be talked about a little later by one of our favorite mass call friends, where we're going to offer up some in-depth trainings from the Working Families Party if you decide that it is your calling and your responsibility to our people to run for office or to scout and support potential candidates for campaigns. They were designed with you in mind. You're going to hear about them from WFP's national director, our good friend and my good brother, Maurice Mitchell, the national director of the Working Families Party. But if this is already sounding like the place to be, we're going to drop the links to RSVP for that 2-part training series in the chat shortly. Okay, so we've talked about the nominees. We've talked about the urgency of signing up for one of those 3 or more than one of those 3 calls to action. We're going to keep reminding ourselves of those calls to actions, but we're going to switch gears a little bit and turn our attention to doing some of that good learning that we do on the mass calls together tonight with our political education. We do this on every single call because the community that learns together sticks together and collectively acts together. We come together and stay together because we want to be winners. Don't you want to win? If you want to win, just say, I want to win in the chat. For today's political education, we're just going to take a second and talk about block and build. We're going to return to talking about this concept that we've been in for the last few. We're going to talk about power. As power builders, we have to be very clear about what we mean by the term power so that we have been, because of that, we've been spending the last few political education sessions digging in deep there. But before we get into today's topic, we're going to take a moment, like we always do, to review some of the material that we've gone over on past calls, both to remind ourselves of where we've come from, the foundation that we've laid, but also so that folks that are new to the mass call tonight aren't left behind because we're starting from 2.0. So we're going to start at 1.0 and set the foundation. We always start with this picture because it is, in fact, the foundation of our shared understanding about why we have to build power. We are currently in a political crisis. The 2 major parties aren't serving us. The Republicans have been taken over by an authoritarian faction, and both major parties are heavily controlled by corporate and ultra-wealthy forces. Working class people are stuck with a bad set of choices. Our task is to build a new majority and to pursue the power to govern. Doing so requires strategy, friends. For guidance on strategy, we looked on previous calls at the thinking of the civil rights movement leader Bayard Rustin. In his essay, From Protest to Politics, Rustin talks about the need to build political power. He also talked about the dynamics of doing so in a 2-party system where broad coalitions will always have to be built in order to win and sustain those wins. When Bayard Rustin wrote From Protest to Politics, the movement had just won a major victory by winning the passage of the Civil Rights Act. And Rustin was taking stock of what they needed to do now to hold on to those wins. He was doing this because he was counting up the power that the movement had. He was planning ahead. He could see the white backlash against the civil rights movement, against the Black liberation struggle that was absolutely coming. As a political strategist, he was attempting to protect the gains of the movement by building a cross-racial majority behind it. Unfortunately, movement strategists like Bayard Rustin tend to be forgotten in the popular history that's told about said movements. Rather, we get told an oversimplified whitewash story of how history works. In this version of history, change comes from public figures engaged in some great struggle. We know enough to have a sense that this erases all the complexities of movements. This picture is still way too oversimplified, but it starts to show a bit more clearly what was going on. There were obviously lots of people involved in the civil rights movement. So we should be suspicious of anyone who tells us that politics boils down to a simple equation that looks like this. There was and is so much standing behind both of these public figures. We got a bit of an insight into this when somehow, against the odds, a white paper written by a DC think tank actually became a household word during the election. Can you guess what I'm talking about in the chat? Y'all know what I'm talking about. Of course, it's Project 2025. Project 2025 represented an entire governing blueprint written by multiple actors from across the conservative movement. It required extreme coordination and a level of shared vision to produce and organize around a strategic document like that. That document and all the people and the institutions that help create it are part of a broader infrastructure that the right has built over decades to win and sustain their governing power. In short, the corporate conservative movement has a plan to control the government. And for all the distractions they'll throw to keep us looking in a different direction, we have to remain laser focused on what they're up to. And we need our own plan to build governing power. This process of controlling the government requires many different people and organizations, each with different areas of specialization and expertise doing their part. You've seen an example of people in that practice tonight on this very call. It requires playing a long game. It's not accomplished in one election or one session of Congress. At WFP, we have a long-term strategy to build this kind of governing power. We developed this strategy in the political conditions that we actually are currently living in. We are working within the two-party system where most voters understand that there are just two flavors of political ice cream, the blue and the red flavors. Our job is to create something new. We need to attract working class people of all races to a new political camp they may not even realize exists yet. Working class people may think there are no alternatives and are just casting protest votes or staying on the couch, but it's our job, every single one of us, to bring them into something different. Here's a simple picture of what I'm talking about. Our circle is not going to start out the same size as the two major parties. We're going to start out smaller, but over the last 26 years that the WFP has been in existence, this circle keeps getting bigger and bigger. When we were founded in New York, we could maybe influence a city council race or a lower state office contest. Then we kept organizing. We also started to move other states, and each place we kept building that center of gravity, election by election, issue fight by issue fight. And as we grow that center of gravity in a city or a county or a state near you, we start to create a force of attraction that is building a new working class politics. We're recruiting more and more working class candidates, and we are seen as fighting for things that matter to working class people like us. As time goes on, more and more people start to notice, and we become a real player on the political map. So let's remind ourselves of the overarching strategy here. The idea that the Working Families Party is creating a new center of gravity on the political map to build and exercise governing power for, by, and of working class people of all races. That is our North Star. Is that where you too are trying to go? Or are you trying to be a part of a politics that builds and exercises governing power for, by, and of working class people of all races? If that's your North Star, I want you to say, that's my North Star, in the chat. In our past calls, we introduced an idea from our friends at the Grassroots Power Project called the 3 Faces of Power. One of those faces of power is the power of building infrastructure and thus shaping the political agenda. When we first looked at this face of power, we used the example of the civil rights movement. In the movement infrastructure that they built, there were big national organizations that most of us have heard about. There was the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. There was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SELC, and Dr. King. There was the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee with folks like John Lewis and Diane Nash and others. There were also smaller regional organizations that played important roles, like the Deacons for Defense and my old home, the Highlander Center. There were local organizations, and they even formed political parties, the most famous of which was likely the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And there were other actors that each played important roles in supporting the goals of the whole movement. All of these organizations, every single one of these leaders within them did not always get along or like each other, friends. There were full of personality conflicts. There were disagreements over tactics, over strategies. This is natural. It is human. But the movement managed to hold together in a functional unity. And this allowed them to reset the political agenda in the United States in one of the most profound ways that this country's ever seen. So that's our review. That's where we've been. Now we want to get into the main topic for today. We want to look at the idea of building an integrated and coordinated division of labor within our movements. We need to do this because we need to win. And as hard as it is, as it might seem to imagine that we could accomplish this goal, I guarantee you that all those years ago, during the late 1950s and early 1960s, some of the leaders of the civil rights movement were also not clear that they could do it. But guess what? They did. I'm starting this section with this quote from the great Frantz Fanon, the great anti-colonial revolutionary leader and thinker from French-occupied Martinique, because I want you to understand what we're going to talk about, even if it is a bit more complex. This next section attempts to answer the question of not just what are the pieces of the infrastructure that we need to build, but how they could fit together. I need you to understand this stuff because if we're going to build a political movement that can grow to scale and to depth, then we're going to need lots of leaders like you all on this call who get the strategy at a deep level. And it's not just about getting it. I'm not talking to you tonight just so we can sound smarter at the next barbecue that we go to. I'm up here talking about this so that we can understand it to the point where we can do it. I need us to be able to put this stuff into action, into application. We need not a dozen people that can be the evangelists of our mission and doing it, or even 100 people who get it. We need thousands who get it, and there are thousands of you on the call tonight. I need you to get it. I need us to be able to produce and to reproduce this strategy at an exponential rate. That is what we need if we want to win. And you all want to win. I sure do. So let's talk to the specifics about it. Because I want to make sure that this is understandable, I'm going to start by using a metaphor and showing you this simple ingredient list. The ingredients of an integrated and coordinated division of labor are strong organizing. We need organizations and organizers who are skilled and rigorous about building people power in working class communities. Somebody put strong organizing in the chat. 2, we need independent party coalition. We need a political vehicle that allows us to build power independent of the Democratic Party. Somebody put independent party coalition in the chat. And then last but certainly not least, in this short ingredient list, we need shared infrastructure. We need to create and maintain tools and infrastructure that allow us to each play our part and to realize synergy and economies of scale between the various parts of what we do. We need strong organizing, we need an independent party coalition, and we need shared infrastructure. Those are the ingredients. So let's look at this picture again. This is the picture of us trying to build a new center of gravity in the US political map. We know that our circle is not as big as the circles of either of the major parties right now. So let's look at the work we need to do to build in this smaller circle so that we can grow. Here we have zoomed in on that smaller circle. If you're on this call as someone involved in an organization at any level, I hope you see yourself in this picture. Whether you're the president of an organization, or you just went to your first meeting, maybe you hosted a We Are Worth Fighting For gathering and that was your first activation, I hope you see yourself in this picture of what it's going to take to build this new center of gravity. Maybe you joined a wolf pack. Maybe you're a new Indivisible member, or you rock with Move On, or maybe you've been following the incredible work of Public Citizen. Well, however you come to this work, I hope you see yourself as a part of this circle that is determined to build a new center of gravity. We need unions and community organizations that are building power with working people where they live, where they work, where they worship, where they dance. We need a party like WFP to act as the year-round electoral governing vehicle for these organizations that are building a base and working class communities, articulating demands that become policy. We need the people in the seats that can then pass them. We need connectors. These are people who tie it all together. They may be that person who's a shop steward in their union and also a leader in their local branch of the WFP. They may be the local auntie down the block who joined an initiative to fight for decent housing in her neighborhood, but then she got politically involved in the election campaign of an exciting WFP champion like Kendra Brooks or Nick O'Rourke in Philadelphia. Or they may be the executive director of a national organization who also sits on the National Executive Committee of the Working Families Party, who's moving high-level work across the country. All of these people, every single one of them, play key roles in bridging their people, their coworkers, their neighbors, or their members to this collective block and build strategy for building our power. At the height of working class power within the Democratic Party, the leadership of unions and other working class institutions were not only aligned with that party, their membership bases were deeply connected to it as well. The same could be said about the peak of the civil rights movement's influence within the Democratic Party. In order to build our own center of gravity on the political map, we're going to need organizations that are deeply rooted in their communities, that are doing the base building work for real and practicing powerful organizing at scale. This means community organizations that are building power around housing rights, around climate justice and health access, to name a few issues that matter to people on the ground. This means unions that are organizing their existing members and new ones into multiracial and democratic worker organizations. And it also means organizations with reach into what are sometimes referred to as middle forces. This might be more middle-class communities. It might be groups of voters that still feel some bond of connection to the Democratic Party, but at the same time are open to the possibility of something new and maybe even seeking that new something. We also need our own party, y'all. For the entirety of its existence, going back to its founding in 1828, the Democratic Party has not been a working class party. At times, working class people have had more power inside of the party, like in the 1930s, but even when the Democrats were a party that had to make internal compromises between their union-aligned wing and the part of their party that lined up with organized capital, right? It was still a struggle. At WFP, we like to say that working class people rent a room in the Democratic Party, but we've never owned the house. WFP is building our own house, our own party, even if the realities of the two-party system mean that we often have to work inside the Democratic Party to get stuff done. We need to build our party and shared infrastructure that allows us to build power outside of the Democratic Party. Infrastructure takes many forms. It's human resources, such as groups of aligned electeds, leaders, activists, as well as highly trained staff able to perform the functions of a party year-round. It's also material resources, such as data infrastructure, cutting-edge technology, financial and legal systems. And finally, as I said before, we need connectors. Connectors are the people that are able to draw it all together. They have the knowledge, the shared vision, strategic vision, the emotional intelligence to organize across organizations and with different kinds of people. The civil rights movement was full of people like this. Many people talk about Miss Ella Baker as the most important civil rights leader that you've never heard of, because she tirelessly lifted up others and built the connective tissue between parts of the movement. She played a leading role across organizations. She worked with a who's who of leaders over multiple generations of the movement, including W.B. Du Bois, Thurgood Marshall, A. Philip Randolph, Martin Luther King Jr. She mentored many emerging activists such as Bob Moses, Kwame Ture, that some of you might know as Stokely Carmichael, Diane Nash. Basically, she was everywhere. She was an organizer's organizer and a partnerships genius. Some of us need to rise up into our responsibility to be the incarnation of Miss Baker's legacy right here, right now, in a 21st century context. Okay, that was a quick ride through the idea of building an integrated and coordinated division of labor. Maybe it's a lot to absorb at once. I get that. And I want to, again, end on this basic ingredient list metaphor. Some of us may be a little unclear of what we're cooking here, but I at least want to make sure you go home from the store with the right ingredients. So ultimately, building this is about building our own ability to control the government, to exercise governing power. We can't achieve this goal if we don't figure out how to organize working class people across race and region into a coherent and a visible force that can shift the politics in our country. Our elders and ancestors have managed to do this in the past, even when the path ahead was not clear. And we can do it too. I want to remind you that if you like this political education session or you want to watch it again to get something that you may have missed, we've been posting the recordings on the WFP website at www.workingfamilies.org/mass calls. We'll drop the link to that in the chat. And we've also put downloadable versions of all the slides and all my speakers' notes for these political education sessions right there on the website. You can take them and use them. Again, you can find those materials at www.workingfamilies.org/mass calls. And certainly do not forget, there are actions that you can take right here, right now, tonight, right? You could set up a meeting with your senator to talk to them about your deep concern about the Trump nominees, right? Because they're not just bad picks, they are a direct threat to your well-being. You can use the form that we keep dropping in the chat to set up a meeting with your senator. You can write a letter to the editor opposing Kash Patel's nomination. We can drop the link for that in the chat as well. You can make calls and send messages to senators. We're going to start our collective call-in day tomorrow, Wednesday, January 15th, and they will be ongoing. We'll drop the link to that as well. And I promise you, if you miss it in the chat, we will follow up with you via email, via text message, depending on how you registered for tonight's call. So I promise you, we won't leave you behind. We'll make sure that you get all of those, but you can also click them now in the chat. Now, you've already heard about some of the work that we need to get done. I just reminded you of it. We need you to sign up for it. I'll give you a little bit of an update as I'm able after our next speaker. I've told you what we need to get done and stuff that you and others can start doing right now to build the power that we need from right where you are. In addition to what you've heard, if we want to control the government, we need to invest in the pipeline to recruit, train, and support working class people of all races to run for office. This is why I'm so excited. I know I'm always excited at this point in the call, but I'm particularly excited about this intervention that my brother, our dear friend, our comrade, our colleague, the national director of the Working Families Party, Mo Mitchell, into this conversation. Maurice, tell us what's good.
What's good? Well, what isn't good when I'm in your presence and I'm in the presence of your leadership? So everybody in the chat, let's give Ash a big WFP welcome into the new year and appreciation for all of Ash's leadership. It's always an honor to join you on these mass calls. Every time I'm here, I can just feel the promise and the power we're building together. Me, you, the thousands of people who are with us right now, that spirit really keeps me going through the work I do. That could be traveling around the country, helping to support people on the grassroots level, state by state, to build a Working Families Party. It could be the conversations, the sometimes small conversations in coalition, sometimes big conversations. That work is really energized and is given meaning by everybody on the call and by leaders like you, Ash. So thank you so very much. Now, the Working Families Party is in the middle of doing a strategic deep dive into the work ahead. Just before the holiday, I met with some leaders at the party, including some of our precious and most strategic staff leaders, to discuss this. And I'm heading tomorrow to a retreat with our National Executive Committee. That's our largest governing body. It consists of labor and community leaders. These are people who work 24/7 to build strong organizations made up of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of everyday working people. These are my bosses, ultimately the people I'm accountable to. And we're going to dig even deeper into strategy. And we're going to continue to sharpen the strategy of the party. But even though there are definitely some big strategic questions to figure out that remain outstanding, one thing is already clear to all of us at the Working Families Party. Some of our biggest successes over the years have come directly from our work to systematically recruit, train, and support working class people of all races to run for office. We have to block Trump, but we also have to birth a new set of working class heroes, heroes for the working class, from the working class, and put them in a governing position. And I want to tell you a little secret, because quite often, the very, very best candidates are the ones who don't know they should be candidates, or even more, resist taking on that type of leadership. They are not the people who wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say to themselves, man, you'd make a good senator. Man, you'd make a good president. You'd make a good mayor. American politics is way too entrepreneurial. It often begins and ends with usually a guy, waking up and deciding it was his day. We believe that the type of leadership that we need to take this country where it needs to go is a different quality of leadership. The best candidates are often the people who are told their whole lives that they didn't matter, or they shouldn't aspire to anything big in their lives. The best candidates are the moms, are the organizers, are the tios and tias, are the informal community leaders who often feel that, I'm too busy to run for office. Or I'm not really a leader, even though everything they do is true leadership. The best candidates are the ones who have real experience that working class voters recognize and can relate to. Those are the transformative leaders that our people need. We were talking earlier about infrastructure, right? The rich and the well-connected have their infrastructure to run for office. People like Elon, he has his infrastructure, and we see what that's doing around the world and in this country. They have their organizations like the Heritage Foundation. They have their university alumni networks and their political parties. But there is far too little infrastructure in place for our people, everyday people like me and you, to get on the path to governing. So we are aiming to change that at the Working Families Party. This is why I'm so excited to invite people to Working Folks Win. It's a 2-part training series to cover the basics of running for office, how to scout out and support potential candidates for campaigns, and the ways that WFP does this work brick by brick, election to election, day in and day out. So please join us Wednesday, January 22nd or February 5th. And we're dropping the links right now. Join us. Now, the first training is for people who are interested in running for office. Now, you don't have to know for sure you want to run. But if there is even an inkling of curiosity about how the process happens, this training is for you. That inkling is enough. I can work with that inkling, right? So join us on January 22nd if you're interested, or if you're interested in being interested in the process of running for office. And for those who are interested in helping us recruit talented hometown working class heroes, join us on February 5th, right? There's somebody in your midst that is that leader that needs the support to be recruited. And we want to show you how that process actually works. And before you tell me you're too busy to come to this training, I want to challenge you to do something. When this call is over, or maybe even now, I want you to do something a little weird. Look, we're in for, I don't know what we're in for the next few years, but we're in for some weird years. I think I could say that. So let's be a little bit weird ourselves in the interest of building up our courage to take leadership steps. I want you to maybe, after this call is over, look in the mirror, or right now, I want you to say, I am looking at the leadership we need. If there's somebody with you, look at them and say, I am looking at the leadership we need. Now, it may be funny, but keep on doing that. Say, I'm ready to step up and serve my community, right? Say, there is nobody coming to save us but us. We are the ones we have been waiting for. If there's somebody with you, say it. Say, there's nobody coming to save us but us. Then say, we are the ones we've been waiting for. If there's nobody, look in the mirror. If you don't have a mirror, when this call is over, go find the mirror and look in the mirror and say that. Say, I'm ready to take the next step to help build the power of my community. Say, we need people like me in public office. Say it again. We need people like me in public office. Say it louder. We need people like me in public office. Say it like you mean it. We need people like me in public office. Now, you're either referring to yourself or you're referring to somebody just like you that needs to step up in order to build the governing majority that we know we need. Are you feeling it yet? Is it okay if it still feels a little funny? Yeah, it's okay. It should feel a little funny. It should feel a little bit weird because you're stepping out of your comfort zone. The comfort zone that's been laid out by the establishment, by the far right, by the corporations, by the people that just want you to be a political observer and not a political actor. But as a movement, we need to push through the way it feels funny or strange and push through that. And that feeling, that pushing through, that's the feeling of power. It's the feeling of collective power. Push through the ways they've taught us, implicitly or explicitly, to sit back and leave it to the experts. Sit back and leave it to the 1%. Sit back and leave it to the political class. We've watched as they've taken the wheel and driven us from one crisis to another. It's time we take the wheel. And we need to build the infrastructure as a movement to help not just a few people or even 100 people, but thousands and millions. For the many, not the few. So if you are game to join us for this training, we are going to share the info in the chat and also send it out to all of you who signed up to receive these messages on text. So if you have not already signed up, you should immediately text on your phone, mass call, MASSCALL to 30403. Thank you for all that you do. Ash, back over to you.
Can we give it up one time for the finest party leader there has ever been, our brother, our colleague, our comrade, Maurice Mitchell. Thank you for bringing the heat. And thank you for creating the infrastructure, you and the WFP team, members and staff and leadership, for creating space to actually train those of us that maybe would have never thought of ourselves as viable candidates in an electoral party. But y'all are doing it, and you're creating the infrastructure to make sure that we can do it and do it excellently. So we love you. We're so grateful for you. Thank you for being here. I want to just, again, remind you that you can text mass call to 30403 to stay in touch, both to get the bat signal and the reminder if you, like me, forget what time, what day it is, when you need to be where. Text mass call to 30403 and we'll make sure that you can confirm before the call that you will attend. We'll make sure you get the links to the calls to actions, and we'll make sure that we all stay together and coordinated. And again, we're going to keep dropping. I see Steve Hughes all up in the chat dropping the links to the Working Folks Win training series. You can sign up and RSVP for getting ready to launch a campaign, and you can sign up for recruiting awesome candidates. We'd love to see you there. And I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you that you can actually become a member of the WFP. You could join this incredible, viable option for growing the power, the solidarity and practice of working families. You can join a welcome gathering. We're going to drop links for that in the chat. You can become a Wolfpack leader or join a Wolfpack near you, which is just a way of starting to get involved in the everyday organizing that is required to build this organization. You can access all the recordings and the materials from the past mass calls. I'll remind you, and we'll redrop the link that you can find those at workingfamilies.org/mass calls. And then you can share this information with your friends by asking them to also join you in texting mass call to 30403. Now, I want to shout out some stuff I saw in the chat while Mo was talking, and then I want to give you a bit of an update about where we are in the other calls to action. While Mo was talking about like the exercise, the homework that he gave us about looking in the mirror and asking ourselves, is it me? We need somebody that's like me in public office. I saw one of my favorite messages in the chat that I've ever seen ever. So for folks that were asking, are people looking at the chat? Yes, but there's one of me. There's 4,000 of you. It's unfair. And that's just in the Zoom. That's not even including people that are watching on Instagram and YouTube. So I'm sorry if we didn't get to every single question, but I saw this incredible comment that was like, I'm looking in the mirror, I'm asking myself that question, and I think it's my wife, and people that look like me in the mirror need to be supporting people like her. So if it's not you and it's like your sister, your cousin, your auntie, your grandma and them, some other working families champion, we need you to come to these trainings. So again, we'll drop the links in the chat for that. I want to tell you that there are already more than 100 letters to the editors submitted. Not just someone saying, I'm going to do it. 100 of you have already submitted your letter to the editor to say that Patel should not be a nominee, right? 81 of you, and this might be old news now, but 81 of you at least have said that you're going to set up a meeting with your senator. Folks from Huntington Valley, PA, folks from Pittsburgh, we see you. Folks from Morristown, New Jersey, Davis, California, Akron, New York, Rochester's in the building, Linden, New Jersey, Seacliff. We see you from Edmonds, Washington, Margate, Florida, Clarksville, Tennessee, my home state. I see you, Clarksville, New York, Rye, New York, Winchester, Connecticut, West Haven, the People's Republic of Brooklyn, Pittsburgh. I see some of the frontline fam coming in from Vermont and New York, from Minneapolis, the Pottstown, Pennsylvania, Province. Yeah, y'all, I can't even say, there's not a, Texas is in the building. Texas is in the building. We see you. Colorado's here. Massachusetts is here. People have signed up from Washington State, from Tucson, Arizona, from Lancaster, from Chatsworth, from Davis, from Two Rivers, Alaska. Y'all are showing up and showing out, and yet there is still room. So I want to remind you that there are 3 other calls to action that you can sign up for. You can take action tonight to stop the dangerous intervention of Trump's nominees, who, again, are not just bad picks. They are folks that are a direct threat to the well-being of you, your family, and certainly people who are suffering even more than those who have the privilege of being on this mass call tonight. I need you to step up. I need you to set up a meeting with your senator. You can use the form that's linked in the chat to do so. I need you to sign up and submit a letter to the editor opposing Kash Patel's nomination. And I need you to make calls and send messages to your senators. I know some of you are like, I already been doing it. That's awesome. I want us to do it together so that they don't get confused and think it's just a bunch of, like, not even a bunch, a couple, maybe 100 individually angry people in a country full of millions. I want us to do it together so they feel the impact of our collective action together, because if approved, these individuals will assume control over the federal agencies that impact every aspect of our lives. So again, I need you to set up a meeting with your senator. I need you to write a letter to the editor opposing Kash Patel's nominations. I need you to make calls and send messages to your senators. And then I need you to come get trained on how to identify candidates, how to launch campaigns, and to see what is required of someone who might decide to be a working families champion by running for elected office. We will, again, make sure that you get access to every single one of these calls to actions and the follow-up that you'll get from us. You can also rewatch this on the recording that you can get at the WFP website that we've dropped in the chat. It's been another action-packed evening with a focus on immediate action and long-term power building, with a focus on building power and our own coordinated and integrated movement infrastructure. I am ecstatic that we get to spend these evenings with you, even through the tough times, especially because the times are tough. It is and always will be our community that gets us through. It is y'all every day who inspire me to continue keeping on, to do this work. And I'm certain that every single one of you is going to leave this call and continue to build the beloved community wherever you are, because that's who you are and that's what we deserve. Thank you so much for being a part of our beloved community. I want you to mark your calendar for our next mass call. It is January 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern. I want you to be sure to RSVP so that we know you're coming. We are looking for you, and we'll be waiting on you on January 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you there. Have an incredible